morning, everybody. We are starting chapter 13 in the book of John. If you want to read along with me, we're going to go verses 1 through 20. Now, before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. During supper, when the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given him all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist, and he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, do you wash my feet?" And Jesus answered him, "What I am doing you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand." Peter said to him, "You shall never wash my feet." And Jesus answered him, "If I do not wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "The one who has bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you." For he knew who was to betray him. That was why he said, "Not all of you are clean." When he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, "Do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you also should do just as I have done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. I am not speaking of all of you. I know whom I have chosen, but the scripture will be fulfilled. He who ate my bread has lifted his heel against me. I am telling you this now before it takes place, that when it does take place you may believe that I am he. Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever receives the one I send receives me, and whoever receives me receives the one who sent me." Okay. Whew. This is a difficult passage, but it's one of my absolute favorites, and it's something that has deeply impacted my life, and so I really hope to kind of get to the spiritual core of this. And just to assuage any fears, we're not washing anybody's feet today, or at least I'm not going to be. The danger is it becomes like a ceremony or a tradition, and so what I thought this morning was maybe we should do it spontaneously without any notice and just call people at random. Well, but that, of course, that's not what's at the heart of this passage. And so there are churches. We have some cousin churches, and I even saw one in Georgia when I was in Georgia for a while, the Forsyth Primitive Baptist Church. They're not primitive like simple. They just like go back to basics. And, I mean, it's pretty clear in the way Jesus spoke here that he says, do this, right? And so they do feet washing, you know. But as we kind of explore this, I want you to see that I believe there's a much deeper message in this. This is an ancient cultural thing that they would do, you know, because they would get all cleaned up and spiffed up and ready to go to dinner, and they had to walk, and they'd walk in the dirt roads, and they'd get their feet dirty. And so they show up to dinner clean and pristine except their feet. And so a servant would come and wash their feet, and now they're like in good shape again, right? That was the idea. And so this is a servant's job, right? This is not a spiritual thing. It's just an example. And so I kind of want to pull that part back, that it's not so much about the washing of the feet. Jesus is telling us something much deeper here and much more meaningful. And there's also an issue. Jesus is constantly facing darkness. There's always, like Pharisees or somebody is always there giving him a hard time. And in this case, he's just with his disciples. And, of course, Judas is there who's going to betray him. So this whole time, Jesus is revealing something so deep, so profound, so beautiful. And we got Judas who's about to betray him. And so that's kind of intermingled in this story. I want to peel Judas back for just a little bit and focus specifically on the foot washing part. Okay, we'll come back to Judas and traditions and all that kind of stuff. But I just want to highlight, I mean, Jesus has got so much going on in his mind. I mean, he can see and understand the thoughts, the hearts of every person in that room, and he knows what's going on. And meanwhile, he has to continue to function and act. I think we would have a hard time knowing what's going on in other people's heads, right? I don't have full control and fully understand what's going on in my own head, let alone being in the presence of all that noise, right, of what other people are thinking and all their thoughts. And so he's handling that actually extremely well, perfectly. Okay, so when we want to discern what Jesus really meant by this washing of the feet, we have to kind of take it apart and understand that Jesus is establishing a kingdom of the heart. It's not about tradition or legalism, right? Or just like doing something to be right? Because that's what legalism is like if I don't do this, I'm okay, and then if I do this, I'm okay. I got all these rules I have to follow. Jesus wants your heart, not rule following. He wants obedience, but obedience of the heart. He wants your heart in alignment with his heart and perfect obedience, but it's not about rule following. It's not the Jews had so many of these rules, and they had all these traditions and things that they had to follow, all these ritualistic cleansings and all these things they had to do. He's not about that at all. And so it's if you know about that, you'll know immediately that Jesus is not saying go wash everybody's feet and then we're all okay, right? Because you could do this. There's other verses that people struggle with, where he says if your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. He doesn't mean that literally, right? Because you still got that whatever problem's going on inside of you, it's not your hand, And if he says if your eye causes you to sin, gouge it out. He's not saying to do that. You're not going to fix it by gouging your eye out. It's your heart that's the problem, right? And so that's where I'm really going to spend a little bit of time before we dive into the text talking about the way of the world. There's a way of the world. We live in it. We experience it. We know it extremely well, so well that it's hard to even recognize it. We just do it. We just are a part of it, and we don't see it at all. And Jesus is showing us something different from the way of the world, right? And so in the way of the world, if you are a king, you don't bow down and like a servant and wash just these regular people's feet. That's not what a king does. If a king were to do that, people would doubt whether they were the king or not. So Jesus is doing something very much against the grain of the society. And this is a very rigid society, very strong social hierarchy, right, where you have status, right? And we have this too. It's not as strict and as regulated as the Jewish culture, but we very much have status, absolutely, right? And people spend a whole bunch of their life chasing after status, trying to get as much as they can, right? And so Jesus is telling us something about this way of the world. And so one of the things I want to focus on is status, right, and what that is. There's also what I'm going to call leveraged exchange, which is in our relationships. It's always transactional, right? And I don't want it to sound cold or heartless or something, but we help each other, right? We do things for each other, right? Especially if you're in a family, like a parent will do things for their child and they won't even expect anything in return, right? And so there's a leverage happening there. I'm an adult, I can have a job, I can make some money, and I'm going to use that to benefit my child. So that's a leveraged exchange. The kid is not really capable of providing for themselves, and so I'm going to step up and do that, and it costs me something, right? That's a leveraged exchange, right? But it goes the other way too, in a very negative way, and you'll see this in the case of people that are like social climbers. They want to befriend somebody that'll get them somewhere, that can get access, and so they use the guise of a relationship that we're going to be friends in order to advance themselves, right? And so people are seeking something from a relationship. So those are the two things I want to really focus on, are status and leveraged exchange. So I've been enumerating aspects of our fallen world, almost like the 10 commandments of Satan's kingdom, right? I'm not going to do 10, but They're just like, this is the way of the world, okay? They're principles that we live by, and even as Christians, we'll live by these. They're in us. It's like part of our operating system, and we don't even realize it, right? We'll say that it's just how things are. Well, Jesus came into the world, and he said there's another way. It doesn't have to be like this. As a matter of fact, this whole world is like turned on its head. It's inverted. It's an inverted system. Everything is backwards and upside down. And so what you're going to see that Jesus does is he's going to flip it around and put it right side back up. And so we're going to look at that as we go through this leverage exchange and status. So what are the two ways of the world I want to focus on today? Well, one is this principle of what's in it for me, right? The way of the world is I'm not going to do anything unless there's something in it for me. There has to be something in it for me. And in the world, this is just an expectation. Like, that's how it is. Like, this isn't even like a bad thing. It's just like, well, okay, what are you going to do? Like, if you say, I'm going to go work at Dollar General, well, how much are you going to pay me, right? Immediately, right out of the gate. And if you don't pay me, then I quit. I'm out of here, right? Or if you're not nice to me, there's a status part. If you don't treat me right, I'm out of here, right? You got to respect my status, right? Who I am. Don't you know who I am? And so what's in it for me is always a consideration that we have. And then the second one that I'm going to focus on here is that we try to get as much as we can while doing as little as we can. This is another principle of Satan's kingdom. Jesus does the opposites of these two things. And I really want to emphasize these because I want you to catch them doing them yourself. We're all in this boat. Every last one of us struggles with this. Yes. So I want you to kind of like keep that in your mind like all week long and catch yourself saying, like, what's in it for me? That's going on in our heads. Like, what is in this for me? Like, why would I do this? And then doing this or getting as much as you can while doing as little to get it as possible, right? That's just the way of the world, right? But God says there's another way. And so when we're able to catch ourselves, that's when we can kind of make a change, and God will be there right there with us, and he will give us the strength and wisdom to do it. So it's not just how the world is. This is the fallen world. It's broken, and it doesn't work. We always kind of like look around and like, man, this place is messed up, but we can't ever quite put our finger on what's wrong. Well, it's us. It's our operating system. There's something inside of us that's very flawed. It's very selfish. It's very self-centered, and we don't even see it. What Jesus tells us to do, instead of saying, what's in it for me, I'm going to turn these words around here, and we will say, what's in me for it, right? Or another way is to say this is, what do I have to offer? How can I help, right? Without saying, like, what do I get out of it? And kids do this so well, right? Hey, you could clean your room. Like, well, what are you going to give me in exchange? Well, how about I keep this house going and the lights on, and like, that's a pretty good deal. Like, now I need a toy, pay up. And so that's always something that's going on inside of us, but we can counteract it. Okay, and then the other one here is, instead, when you're trying to get as much as you can while doing as little as you can, well, what if you gave as much as you could while doing as much as you could? Instead of receiving it, you're going to give it, right? And give as much as you can. And I don't mean money, right? I mean, it can be money, but it doesn't have to be money. It just could come in many, many, many forms. All right, so we got those two things we're going to be looking at. I want to consider our culture and how this impacts our culture, and we'll dive into the text here. First verse is, now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. So it's almost the time for him to go to the cross. His hour is coming. They're going to humiliate him. They're going to torture him. I mean, this is horrific stuff that he has to suffer through, and they're going to kill him. And he knows this. He knows that's coming. And so he's sitting down at dinner with his disciples, and he's giving them something, right? Most of us, if we were on the verge of being executed, knowing what he was facing, we'd be in a panic. We'd be running the other way, try to get out of town, right? But Jesus is facing this. He's choosing this. He's doing it willingly. And in the meantime, he is there present with the disciples, and he is giving them something of great value. That's hard to understand. On top of that, he's going to serve as a servant his worst enemy. Well, maybe not his worst enemy, but Judas is there, who's going to betray him. And he's going to serve Judas in a very humbling way, and he's going to do it with sincerity. Right? I would have a hard time with this. I might be able to pull off the act of doing it, but I would begrudge it. I would groan and moan and be miserable. But we need to add a layer of complexity to this, because we don't really understand, we can't really understand Jesus' position in relation to us. We know that he's at the hand of God, right? We know where he is relationally with God, but that distance between him and us, we can't even understand. We don't know all the layers, right? When talking about John the Baptist, Jesus says that John the Baptist was the best man of the world, right? He's the best that there ever was, but yet he's the least in the kingdom of God. And so there's all these unknown people, beings that exist within God's government, his whole world, that are between us and them, right? And what's amazing is that Jesus, he wants a personal relationship with us, right? And so I'm going to give you perhaps a bad example here, but just to give some context to this, right? That the relationship Jesus wants with us versus the world, right? Here he's like king of all creation, and he wants a relationship with me, right? Right? He wants me to come to him when I have a problem, and I say, Lord, I don't know how to handle this, right? Could you imagine if I were to try to call the president? I mean, he's not going to take my call, right? He doesn't want anything to do with me. He's like, who is this guy? Dave back? Who is that guy? Right? No. I couldn't even get close. I couldn't get into his cabinet. I couldn't even probably talk to anybody at the White House. They would have nothing to do with me. I'm nobody to them, right? But could you imagine if I were to get through to the president and I'd say, Mr. President, I had a really bad day. Can you help me with my problems? Right? No, he doesn't. He's going to hang up on me and be like, don't ever let that guy call me again. I have better things to do. Meanwhile, Jesus, the creator of the universe, wants that from me. And he has the capacity to deal with that, right? To handle that with all of us, all at the same time, that he wants that deep personal relationship with us. And he cares about me so much that he wants to hear from me more than I want to talk to him, right? So how could that be? Like, this is totally different from the way of the world, right? Another way to kind of think about Jesus' position, I say position is like, his job status, his status. We hear the words in the Bible that he came down from heaven. Well, it's not just moving down, like he came down. He went from heaven he came here. He's moving down positionally, right? He lowered himself in status to the very lowest place, right? I mean, he was a teacher, but he didn't get certified by the religious authorities. He had no education, no certification, no status. He had nothing. He had no wealth. He had no prestige. He had nothing. And so he went from a position that we cannot even comprehend, and when he descended down to earth, he's lowering himself, right? He's taking a position that's beneath him, way, 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 way beneath him. And so that's something for us to consider as we read this too, is status. But then at the end it says he ascends to heaven. It's not just that he's like climbing Jacob's ladder to get back up. He is moving up in his status. His position is going back to the throne with the Father, right? It's a status thing, not just he was here and then he went there. Okay, so there is a huge gulf that we can't even comprehend between his position and ours. And here he is, facing the end of his life, horrific death, and he loves these guys to the very end. What's he worried about? Not himself. He's worried about them. He's like, I got to teach them what I can while I'm here, right? They got to know this stuff because I'm not going to be here that much longer. And boy, they're hard. They don't learn. They don't understand, right? They're in their world, their culture, their fishbowl, and they can't understand what he's talking about because it's so radically different from what they understand. And so in this pursuit to the very end, there is a doctrine of the perseverance of the saints, and we're all saints, right? The Catholics kind of pick and choose who they want to be saints. Well, in most of Christianity, the believers are the saints, right? And so the perseverance of the saints is one of the biggest evidences of your faith and your relationship with God is that you persevere to the end. And here Jesus is doing this in a grand way, and he's the best example, perfect model of what that looks like. Paul talks about this in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. He says, do you not know that those who run a race all run, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may win. Everyone who competes in the games exercises self-control in all things. Then they do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable one. Therefore, I run in such a way as to not without aim. I box in such a way as not beating the air, but I discipline my body and make it my slave so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified. So Paul did this very same thing. He had to push to the end. But none of us could make it on our own, right? It's the perseverance is a gift that comes along with the faith, right? The faith is also a gift. It comes through the relationship with God. And so in that effort to get to heaven, you can't make it. You know, even if you want it, you're not going to get there. You have to have that relationship with God in order to get there. And so Jesus is our perfect example of that. And he shows us that it's available to anyone because here he is. He's of no status, no wealth, and he is on the path to get to heaven. When we are faced with a situation where there are circumstances, consequences, things that we really don't like, we will fixate on our problem, right? And I do this, absolutely, I do this. We fixate on that problem, and there's a woe is me, oh man, I've got it so bad, I don't know what I'm going to do, right? And what Jesus is showing us is instead of fixating on himself, he turns and is still trying to do for others while he's in a pretty bad way. I mean, like I said before, I mean, if I was facing execution in just a couple days, I probably wouldn't be standing up here talking to you, right? I probably would be in a panic, running from the cops. I don't know what it would be. If I were facing an execution, I would be very fixated on myself. But here he is facing that, knowing it's coming, and then he is still giving. Especially towards Judas. And it shows that his strength, this is internal strength, his spiritual strength, is greater than any kind of resentment, right? And I know in my life, when I start getting resentment, it overcomes me, right? And I let that be a limit. I'm not going to do anymore. I quit. This is done. I've had enough, right? There's so much selfishness embodied in that. Jesus doesn't demonstrate selfishness at all. He's even willing to serve his enemy. During supper, when the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. Okay, he's about to do something. He's stopping what he's doing. He's eating dinner, right? And he's going to stop that. He's going to do something else. But all of these things are going on at once. He's got Judas about to betray him. But on the other hand, knowing that the Father had given all things, that's like the whole world, right? He was going to inherit an entire kingdom, the whole world. And that he had come from God. He knows who he is. He knows his position. He knows his true status. It far exceeds anything that exists here on earth. right? Knowing all this, with all this going on in his mind, he gets up and he's about to serve in the lowliest way possible, right? And so he is choosing that right in this moment where he could be prideful. Like, do you guys not know who I am, right? Do you know who I am? You look at you guys. You guys are ignorant. You don't know anything, and I'm about to face death. And you guys, look at you. You guys are so right? He could flip out on them and go, but that's a selfish thing. He doesn't do that. He does a selfless thing, right? So he stops what he's doing, knowing what's going on. He knows he's the king of all. He knows how they're going to treat him, how they're going to disrespect him, how they're going to kill him. But his status, who he is not dependent on what people think about him. He is who he is. It does not matter whether anybody recognizes it or not. He is king of all, and he knows that, and he knows his relationship with God. And so in one sense, that could inflate his ego, but because he knows God and he knows these things, he actually lowers himself. This gives him the strength to lower himself even further. And he's about to wash their feet. And like I said before, like, who wants a king who washes feet? Like, that's a servant's job, right? And I was trying to think of jobs that would be equivalent today. Maybe like maid service at the hotel might be something, where they got to come in and clean up your dirty towels and all that stuff, and to think of like a presidential candidate or somebody at a very high level that would stoop down and do a very lowly job, like maybe washing dishes in the back of the restaurant or something, they would have nothing to do with that, right? They would reject it. But here he's embracing it. And so I'm going to say this is a case of leveraged exchange, but instead of getting something from it, he's giving something. He has leverage because of his status of who he is, and he's going to use that to do something very profound for these guys. And there's nothing in it for him. Well, I mean, maybe in the sense that he wants a relationship with them. That's all he's after. He wants their hearts. That's it. And this is necessary. And so he's going to do it to them. Now, so let's contrast that with Judas, who is about to take some action. He's going to have some leveraged exchange. He's got status. He's one of the 12, right? He's one of the men. He's one of the main guys. He's kind of close to Jesus. He's got some status. He's going to use that, go to the Pharisees, and what's he going to do with his position and his status? He's going to turn Jesus in, get 30 pieces of silver from it. He's getting something from that at such a great cost because they're going to capture Jesus and execute him. Right, so an example of using leverage exchange in the other way, that he uses his relationship, his position to get something from it, and it's really sad. And so, I mean, his outcome is also very, very sad. He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. Okay, so like I said before, in ancient Israel, this is a custom that the servant washed the feet of guests when they came to dinner because they came with dirty feet. They were clean, but their feet were dirty. Okay, and this is not what this is about. It's about spiritual matters. Jesus is not worried about the cleanliness of your feet. Okay. What's really, really important is to see that Jesus is committing an act of service. And this passage really illuminates what it means to be a servant leader, right? A servant leader. And those terms may seem like they contradict each other. How could you be a servant and a leader? Well, Jesus is doing this, and he's showing us, he's modeling it for us, right? And this fallen world, where we have like, what's in it for me and get as much as you can, it doesn't make any sense. There's a principle that he's trying to show us, right? And it's the principle that we're to repeat, not necessarily the act, okay? Because where there's value, where there will be fruit from this, is carrying out the principle that Jesus is demonstrating. Verse 6, he came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, do you wash my feet? And Jesus answered him, what I am doing you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand. Peter said to him, you shall never wash my feet. So you see that Peter is operating by the way of the world, right? There's pride in here. There's all kinds of stuff going on from him. He's like, don't do this. Like, what are you doing? This is strange. It's weird. I'm uncomfortable. Like, this is not right. the Messiah and I'm, the disciple, and like this just can't be. Well, so Jesus says, no, you don't understand. I'm going to explain this to you. And I think this is a really great verse because oftentimes we don't understand. And when we don't understand something, we have to trust. And so I can sometimes, when I don't understand something, I'm like, God, what is this? I don't know how to handle this. Like, what do you want me to do? It's like, you don't have to understand. You just have to trust. And if he says you need to do this, you need to do it. And so ultimately here, Peter is going to submit to this. We have to let go of our pride in order to surrender to the cleansing that Christ has for us. We have to let go of that, right? We tend to beat ourselves up. We think of ourselves in this worldly sense of like, oh man, I'm nobody, I'm worthless, right? That's the kind of thing that he can't. You got to let go of that before he can cleanse you, right? Because our identity is wrapped up in what other people think about us. When you can get rid of that and see that your identity is not in what people think, your identity is in Christ and what he did for you, then everything changes, right? And so I always mention this verse, so I apologize to you guys if you heard it a million times. And there's a song, it's my worth is not in what I own. It says, two mysteries here I confess, my worth and my unworthiness, right? Because I'm a sinner, I'm a wretch, I'm a mess. I'm not worth Jesus coming all the way down from heaven and coming and dying for me. He took my punishment. Like, why would he do so? I'm not worth that. Why wouldn't he just, like, destroy me, delete me, get rid of me? It would be a lot easier, And so if I see my value in how, like, the world sees me, I'm going to get caught up in all that misery. On one hand, that's true. But on the other hand, I was worth him coming into this world and dying for. So there's something unbelievably unimaginable of value in each and every one of us, that it was worth him stepping down from the throne to come down here and to take our punishment for. It was worth it, right? So we don't understand this. So that's why it says there's two mysteries that I confess, my worth and my unworthiness. And it's important that we don't know this. We can't know these things. Last week I talked about the verse from Paul that said it's right. We see things dimly as if in a mirror, right? We don't fully understand. We can't process it. We can't figure it out. And we just have to trust. The amazing thing about this is that Jesus wants to, quote unquote, wash our feet. He wants to cleanse us. He wants to come. He is going to preserve, save every one of his sheep. And he is seeking us, right? And we resist him, right? Because we say, I don't want any, I'm not worth it, I'm not worthy, just leave me alone, right? He wants to come in and cleanse us and restore us and for us to find our identity in him. So in a much grander way, we've got him cleansing the feet, right, of the disciples. In a much grander way, he goes to the cross and does this on an infinitely, in a bigger context. So when we sang that song, is he worthy, right? We've been asking the question, am I worthy? Now the question is he worthy? Which comes from the book of Revelation. They say they've got the scroll they got to open up, and nobody can open it up because it kind of wraps up the world as we know it. And is anyone worthy? Is there anybody? Well, Christ is. Why? Because he came into this world, and he gave everything, and he went all the way to the end, and he demonstrated that there was no compromising in him. He has perfect integrity, and he will do the right thing in a dark place all the way to the end, no matter what it costs him. And so is he worthy? Absolutely, he's worthy, and he's demonstrated it, and that's how we know that we can trust him. So, okay, he's washing their feet. Peter doesn't want him to do it and says, you'll never do it. And so Jesus answered him, if I do not wash you, you have no share with me. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. So here he capitulates. Peter's like, okay, don't just wash my feet, wash the whole thing, right? And so that's the kind of attitude that we need to have when we don't understand and God tells us, no, you got to do this. We say, okay, do it, go all the way. Absolutely, everything you need to do. And then Jesus comes back to him and says, like, okay, you're already clean, right? But he's not talking about his bodily condition, right? He's talking about his spiritual condition, right? Because it does not matter if you have dirty feet or not. If your body's dirty, it doesn't matter. That has nothing to do on your relationship with God, okay? So I had a visitor this week that he was quick to tell me, like, do you know the things people say that aren't in the Bible? And one of them was cleanliness is next to godliness. He says, that's not in the Bible, but people think that's in the Bible. I mean, it may be a true idiom. There's nothing wrong with being clean, and dirty is not so great, but it has nothing to do with your spiritual condition. All of this is about their spiritual condition, right? And so every last one of us are in situations like these disciples, right? But they have mostly been clean. So Jesus says that to them. The one who has bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you. For he knew who was to betray him. That is why he said, not all of you are clean. So he's using figurative language here, simultaneously referencing the immediate situation, which is like the cleanliness of their feet, but also their spiritual condition. Right? He's really talking about their spiritual condition, but he's using this almost like a parable. Jesus often speaks in parables and he tells stories. Well, he's using a real-life situation to explain a spiritual situation, right? And he's saying, you're already clean. You came to dinner. You got cleaned up before you came here, right? It's just your feet that need washed because you've been walking on the dirt roads. And so what he's telling them is they've already been with him. He has already cleansed them. He is already preparing them for the dinner, right? They're already cleaned and ready to go. You just got to get your feet clean, right, because of the journey here, right? And so that's so true to life as a Christian, right, because we enter into the faith a mess. Like, I mean, and so Jesus will cleanse you. We call this, the big church word is sanctification. He will cleanse us, and we get better and better and better. We grow. Things are difficult. Things get harder sometimes, but we get stronger and better, and then we don't have that much that needs to be done because he's been with us and he's been keeping us clean the whole time. Anytime we get sullied up, he cleanses us, right? And so he restores us and gets us right again. So he's saying, you guys, you really don't need to be fully cleansed, right? You just need a little touch up, and then you're good to go. But there was one person that is not in that condition, and it's one that has been with them the entire time. When he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do just as I have done to you. He says, do you understand what I have done to you? Because it's not so simple as just him going through and mechanically cleansing their feet. That's not what this is about. Do you get the real meaning behind this is what he's saying. I'm trying to show you something about God's kingdom is something spiritual, something very deep that's different from the world. Okay, it's not just some cultural practice and you're making sure your feet are clean for dinner. What he's showing them is about being a servant leader, but also about providing spiritual cleansing for one another. Okay? I'll give you a fun example here, is that I didn't know for a long time that I was going bald. Okay? This was not something I don't spend a lot of time working on my hair, and it's a slow process. You don't notice it immediately. What I noticed was my barber was leaving my hair longer on the top. And I couldn't understand why. I'm like, I kind of like this style, but why is he leaving the hair longer on top? And it took me a long time to realize I'm going bald. And he's just really nice about it. He didn't even say anything. He's just like doing it, he's very gracefully helping me, right? He's like, okay, you got a little bit of baldness here. We can fix that. And so what he was giving me a comb over. It was the beginnings of a comb over. And I didn't realize it. Except that I taught middle school, and I go into the middle school, and the kids in middle school are not so nice, right? So the barber, he used his position and benefited me, right? He's being kind and gentle and loving to me, whereas middle school kids are going to use that situation and get as much traction out of it as they possibly can. And they're like, Mr. Back, are you wearing a toupee? I was like, no, I'm not wearing a toupee. I saw you walking outside and your hair flew up. So there's all these rumors about me having a toupee, and I'm like, it's not a toupee, and I'd pull up my hair and see, like, it's attached, right? Like, see, and I'm like, I think this is getting more and more, and I'm having to brush it over a lot. And so, okay, this is how this works, right? That's that leveraged exchange in the relationship, right? I can harm you, and when I do something aggressive, like verbally aggressive, if I say something mean, it's because I'm trying to get something out of that, right? I want myself to be better. And middle school kids, this is all they do, right? They say horrible things to each other because they want to find their status. They want to elevate their status. Whereas the barber was very kind, and I'm sure he sees all kinds of, everybody goes bald. All men go bald, right? So they is doing a very different thing with his leveraged exchange. Okay, so we have to bear with each other's burdens, right? And this comes straight from the Bible. But what that means, we hear that all the time, it means taking on someone else's burden, right? This is so against the world, to take on someone else's burden, right? That somebody has a problem and then I'm going to take that on. To me, I don't want problems. I don't even want my own problems. I want as few problems as possible. I want a comfortable, easy life. I don't want any problems, no problems. And what the Bible is telling us is that we bear each other's burdens. And so much so, we're supposed to be in unity, right? And so that if you have a problem, it is my problem, right? And if I have a problem, this is hard. If I have a problem, that's your problem, okay? And if I have a problem in secret, it's hidden, I don't tell anybody about, that's your problem. And you don't even know it, right? You are dealing with that problem. The people in my life, everyone around me, the people I work with, people at the store, whatever's going on in me, they are bearing some of that burden, right? Now in the church, we bear that load heavily, right? We are supposed to. We're supposed to lean into each other. And if I'm struggling with something, then I need to share that with my church. And they will help me carry that burden, right? And then as that burden is lifted from me, I'm better able to help them with their burden, right? And we're supposed to help each other in this way. But this goes totally against the way of the world, right? Where I don't want any of your problems. And I'll tell you, Ms. Brittany, you're new here, so you probably don't know my history. I haven't always been a Christian, right? And when I was in my early 20s, I was in a relationship with someone, and she had a lot of problems, a lot. And I tried to help her, right? I tried. And I got to where I said, you know what, my life, I am not going to let my life be defined by her problems. And I cut her loose. I broke up with her, right? I have a child with this woman. I cut her off. And the devastation that has come from that is immeasurable. And I regret that. I don't know what I could have done differently. I didn't know God. I didn't have the strength of perseverance. I didn't have that. So in my flesh, that's all I was able to do. And in my flesh, I gave it every ounce of strength I had, and I couldn't do it. And I said, selfishly, I will not let my life be defined by that woman and her problems. And so I cut it off, and I walked away, right? Well, Christ is staying to the very end in love, right? And he's bearing the burdens of the people that he's with to the very, very end. And I think that's so remarkable, and it's a standard we could only live up to in relationship with him, okay? So we have to use that leverage exchange to benefit others, especially when they're at their worst. That's when they need somebody the most, is when they're at their worst. And so we bear each other's burdens. We have to get away from keeping things in the dark and keeping them a secret and hiding it and just suffering in silence. We need to share those things so that we can help lift each other out of it, because it's not supposed to be this way, right? It's not. There's supposed to be joy and love. And this life was never meant to be miserable. But it's miserable. It's horrible, right? It's terrible. And it wasn't supposed to be this way. He's telling us how to get out of that garbage world and get into his kingdom where it is wonderful, right? But this means doing things that lowers our status, right? If I would have stayed in that relationship, it would have cost me, right? I would have had this ball and chain anchor of someone that was, I would have said, destroying my life. She was destroying her own life, but in my life too, in the process, right? She had gone to jail. She had stolen from her work and went to jail. And I was like, I can't have a wife with a criminal record and all, right? Well, because I could not bear that burden. And as a non-believer, I couldn't. But as a believer, we have to lean into those things, right? Something was going on in her. Now, she's not a believer either, so I don't know that there was ever any fix in that. God put me through that for some reason. I don't fully understand. But when people come to us and they're lowly, we go lower. That's the answer, is we go lower and we lift them up. We help them. We don't cast them away. We lift them up, regardless of the circumstances, right? They have to be on a path to God, right? Because they can't get out of this without God. But as long as they're on the path with Christ, we help them and we lower ourselves to meet them where they are. I have been extremely blessed by Nancy Roanhorst over here. And I learned a lot of this from her example, okay? Because I was a non-believer. I met her. This has been over a decade ago. And she was a legit Christian. I had known a lot of hypocritical Christians. I knew people that would say stuff and they didn't really do it. Well, she's the real deal, and this was the first real Christian that I'm sure I had met other real Christians, but she was the first one I knew closely, and she bore my burdens with me. And even when I was in sin, she bore that burden with me. She didn't reject me. She didn't cast me away. She stayed with me, and she helped me through that. And that's where I learned that this washing feet thing is so much deeper than some sort of physical cleaning, right? That we are to bear with one another, and it's beautiful. It is absolutely beautiful to pull out of that. And I'm a big believer that when we get to heaven, some of the eternal things that we have, there's eternal treasures that come, but it's not gold coins, right? We don't get the pirate's booty when we get to heaven, right? What you get, these eternal treasures, are things like gratitude. Like, she's going to have my eternal gratitude forever. Just will never, ever, 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 ever end. And that's a treasure that she can hold on to, right? And I pray that I have that kind of impact on other people's lives. And then when I get to heaven, and this is not a greedy thing, but it's just, that I want to be in a place where there's gratitude, loving gratitude, not just for me, but for everybody, right? And so that's the outcome of this foot cleansing thing, is that we bear with our burdens and we persevere and we get through and we grow closer to God. Verse 16, truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. Let me crack the code on this. People of the world, even the disciples, this is so strange to the point of being offensive, what he's telling them. Lower yourself in status? My plan is to get as much status as I can get, right? And in Matthew, they're arguing over who's going to be the greatest in heaven, right? And they want the seat right next to Christ, and they're wanting status. And he tells them, hey, look, the first will be last. You guys that are putting yourself first, you're going to be at the end of the line. The person who puts himself last, they get put to the front of the line. And so this is the lowering yourself, right? Yeah, so whoever puts themselves at the back of the line, they're the ones that get in the front of the line in heaven. So you people that are chasing status, it's your only temporary gain is all you're going to get, right? This is a temporary thing. I hope you enjoy it while it lasts, because it's going to be gone. But the people that put themselves last, and I think of like missionaries who give up everything they own and they go overseas somewhere to try to share the truth of God to people, they are putting themselves, their own lives, they could go pursue a career and make all kinds of money, but they don't do it. They give up everything and they go off to serve God. That's a really amazing thing. So those are the kind of people that will be first in heaven, are the ones that give of themselves completely, right? And what I think a lot of people don't realize is this: it's a joy for them to give that up, right? Because everything is upside down and backwards. And when Jesus resets this in our lives and he turns things right side up, it's a joy to give, a joy instead of a burden. So he says this about being a servant is not greater than his master, because I suspect they don't want to do this, right? This is so radical, so profound. They're probably like, yeah, I want status. I don't want to lower myself and wash people's feet. Are you kidding me? And he's saying, hey, if you're my student and I'm your teacher, you're not better than the teacher, right? You need to follow what teacher says. And in this case, it's not just student-teacher, right? We are created beings, and he is our creator. And so whatever the creator does, we're not like, oh, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm not better than that. Thank you, but I'm better than that, so no thanks. That means you're not with him, is what he's saying. So he's telling them that, right? He says, if you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. Again, not the foot washing, right? It doesn't have to be that. It's so much bigger than that. It's everything, right? It's in everything we do that we are to be servants and to give of ourselves. And the giving, too, I want to highlight. I know I'm probably going on really long today, but the giving, we don't give in lack. We give in abundance because our Father God has an infinite supply. Right? When it comes to love, me and my flesh, my love is very petty, it's very selfish, it's very limited, it's finite, but God's love is infinite. And so he can give and give and give and give, and it never runs out, right? My patience runs out very easily, right? Well, maybe I'm kind of patient, a little bit. I'll brag on myself just a bit. I'm not impatient, we'll say that. So, but it runs out. There's only a limited amount. Right? I get to my end and I'm like, this is it, I'm done. Right? God's not like that. It's infinite. And he always has more to give. And so if you're with a relationship with God, there's all the examples in the Bible of being the vine and the branches and all those things. If you are connected to him, you are connected to his infinite supply. So as you get depleted, he resupplies you. So when we're giving in joy, it's because we know we are very, very wealthy in that regard. Right? We talked in previous weeks about a wealthy person doesn't flaunt their wealth. They don't need to wear all the fancy clothes and have the fancy car because they know who they are and what they have. Well, this is on a much grander level, a spiritual level, when you know who God is and that he has an infinite abundance of this kind of selfless love, then you're not worried about running out, getting depleted. You have more and more to give because it's his, it's not mine. Of course, he says, I am not speaking of all of you. I know whom I have chosen, but the scripture will be fulfilled. He who ate my bread has lifted his heel against me. I am telling you this now before it takes place, that when it does take place, you may believe that I am he. So there's this constant pressure of light and dark. You got Judas about to betray him, and that's going on right now. And he's saying this was prophesied. And when you see that this turns out to really happen, you're going to get extra confirmation. You get to believe even more that I am who I say I am because what was predicted is now happening, right? And this was predicted. And so the very thing is they're sitting there eating dinner, they have bread, and pretty soon he's going to pass this bread to the one that will betray him, and that prophecy will be fulfilled. And he's telling them now so they catch it when it happens, right? Because they tend to catch these things after the fact. John notes several times where they realize later, whoa, this was a prophecy that was fulfilled. We didn't know it at the time, but here it is. Verse 20, truly, truly, I say to you, whoever receives the one I send receives me, and whoever receives me receives the one who sent me. This is a proclamation of Christ's kingdom here on earth. And this idea of receiving him is something that's very rich in theology, and it's something I can't spend a lot of time on today, but it's very much worth pondering, meditating on. What does that mean to receive Christ? Like when I receive a gift, when I was a little boy at Christmas time, I would receive a gift from my parents, right? I was taking something from them. Think about that leveraged exchange. Somebody who has way more than me, more than I could ever do, is doing something for me that I can't do for myself, and I can't pay him back. There's nothing I can do. There is a leveraged exchange on my behalf, right? And so what he has done for us, receiving him, means that you are now a son or daughter of God, and you are receiving eternal life in the kingdom of God, which is something we could never accomplish on our own. This is one of the greatest evidences of the truth of God and his kingdom and his ways. That we are transformed by this. You can't be who you were before, right? I remember getting in trouble as a kid, and my dad, this is like middle school, early high school, he would tell me, like, you don't get to do that, right? That's not who you are. You don't get to do that. No more. What were you doing? I was hanging around with some kids I shouldn't have been hanging around with. I got into some stuff that I wouldn't normally do, and he's like, no, you don't get to do that. You're better than that. And when Christ comes into your life, there's things that you're not able to do anymore. You might still find yourself in them, but there's going to be a pull that says, you don't get to do that anymore. What are you doing? Don't you know who you are? Right? And so that will pull you back. Remembering that leveraged exchange, what has been done for you. We have to give up our worldly status and find our identity in Christ, right? And how he operates. We've got to leverage our relationships in favor of others. There's a really good Andy Stanley sermon on this from years and years ago where he talked about having something to offer others instead of something to take from them. As a boss, you can tell a good boss is someone who has something to give to their employees instead of just a bunch of demands, right? And I really saw this as a teacher because I had many different principals that operated in different ways, and quite a few of them would just put a lot of demands on us. We want better test scores. What are you doing? I want this turned in by this day. You got to have your grades submitted by this time. It was all demand. Well, I had one principal, Jaquetta Alexander, who came to me with love and support and help. And where there was a problem in my classroom, she came and helped me get better. And it was like, wow, this is what this is supposed to be like. She was doing leveraged exchange on my behalf at a cost to herself, right? And she was very, very good to me. She used her status and her integrity to stick up for me, to build me up, to edify me, to bring me out of the situation I was in. Right? I mean, I came in the middle of the year. It was a bad situation. It was a difficult class. She helped me. Instead of saying, oh, your class is disorderly. What are you doing? What kind of teacher are you? She came and she helped, and she showed me how you deal with a class like that, and it was amazing, right? So a good boss is someone who has something to give, and a struggling boss is one that's demanding, right? And so it's not just bosses, though. This is in all relationships. There's a loyalty test to the kingdom here, right? He says, if you receive me, if you do these things, right, then you've received the one that sent me, which is God himself, right? We have to constantly check ourselves, am I doing this? Because our nature, it's hardwired into us, is to be selfish. It's right. It's to what's in it for me? That's our automatic response. What's in it for me? What's in it for me? And we have to catch it and redirect it, right? And to say, like, okay, it's not about what's in it for me. It's what's in it for them. What do I have to offer these people? What can I do? Instead of putting demands on them, what do I have to give that will make things better? And so we got to constantly measure ourselves and compare ourselves to the Word of God and see how we measure up. It's not a condemnation thing. It's a growth thing, right? Where am I? It's the kind of test that says, where am I? Where am I? Where do I need to go? What direction do I need to head? And so I'll close with just this question of, like, what are you clinging to in this world, right? And I'll say, what am I clinging to? Because I'm still clinging to some things. What are we clinging to in this world? We have death grip on some things that we just can't let go of, right? But when we surrender that, like Peter surrendering to Christ, when we let go, whatever it was that was holding us in that place and keeping us in this world instead of God's world, right? We let loose, and Christ will come and cleanse us. He will renew us. He will restore us, right? Over and over and over again. He'll do this until we're made perfect in his image. And just like, what a beautiful, beautiful thing. So I really hope that your understanding about the foot washing thing is maybe a little bit deeper than before, because there's a lot of confusion over this and even anxiety, like, oh, it's not one of those churches. Like, where they wash their feet. Is it, it's kind of strange. It's a culturally unacceptable thing. And so there's nothing wrong with it. Some those churches that do that, I'm not against them. Like it's not harmful. It's not anti-biblical. I just don't think it's necessarily exactly what Jesus was talking about, right? There's a much deeper spiritual cleansing at work here. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for sending your Son into this world. And Lord, this is just one example of how he operated and an example of how things work in your kingdom. And Lord, I just ask that you open our eyes to those things of your kingdom, that you prepare us for that kingdom. And Lord, just give us a glimpse of the beauty and splendor, the joy of living in a sinless world. We live in a very sinful world, and even our own bodies are sinful. And Lord, I just pray for a glimpse of the glory and the beauty, the splendor of a sinless existence, where we have perfected bodies, we walk in unity with you, and we see things in fullness that we just can't even comprehend now. And Lord, I just ask for that, and to give us the strength to persevere, that knowing those things, getting just that tiny glimpse is enough to carry us all the way to the end, Lord, carrying your banner and bringing as many people as you see fit with us. And so I just ask for that, Lord, that we're a struggling church, and we face pretty heavy odds. And so I just pray for the strength to persevere, but also for people to see that perseverance, to recognize that there's something very different here from the world that we live in. And that if you want out of this world, this is the way, right? And that there are people like Nancy Roanhorse that have been on that path their entire lives, and that we can walk with them, and they will help us understand and grow closer to you every step of the way. In your name we pray. Amen.